and kind of lay them out for you. But right now we're so busy drinking water from a fire hose of investigations that we're letting the investigators do their job. So I wish I could give you a more thorough answer on that. I just don't have one right now. We'll try to follow up and give a good accounting of what we're investigating.
Yeah, could the office do that? I mean, could you guys provide that? I mean, and are we talking dozens? Are we talking more than 100? You said you have 24 investigators. Are they overwhelmed with these complaints coming in? Can you sort of give some?
Well, we so I had to triage them as they come in because we accept everything on face value that it's a real thing, and then we'd see, is there a way to get evidence on this? Is there a way we can get people assigned to those? And if they affect more voters, they would essentially move to the top of the list. Francis Watson, our chief investigator, gave me a list, but this was last week. We can probably update that and figure out a way to get you some good information to give you a basic scale of what we're looking at. So I know.
Okay, I'll follow up with Walter. Follow up with Walter.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, NBC News Desk.
Hi, this is Paula. Thanks, Gabe. You may have talked about this at the beginning. I feel like I came in while you were in the middle of speaking, but the stuff going on with DeKalb County and the Georgia GOP party submitting a letter asking for an investigation. Obviously, the state is certifying based off of the initial machine count. This was an error that they're claiming occurred during the hand recount. Can you talk about what's going on there and what the state needs to do or is going to do? It seems like the ballots were recounted and the issue was corrected, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then I have a follow-up, but I'll let you answer that first.
You did miss the early part of it. We did address this, but I will do it again so you have it for your recording. Chairman Schaefer, who's been a friend for over 31 years, we got their affidavit on this. We were aware of this on Sunday. This is what happens in an audit. This is why you don't release interim audit results, because human beings are going to make mistakes in a hand count audit. So the error was discovered, it was corrected. It would have been discovered and corrected even without the monitor there to have pointed it out, because we have quality control measures that our audit consultants go through on each one of these tally sheets to make sure you didn't transpose a number, you didn't add a zero, you didn't miss a batch. I mean, all those kind of things go into an audit. So this was a non-event, non-issue kind of thing, but it does help stir the pot to a degree, which is unfortunate because, and this is why you don't release interim audit results, because it can be confusing for people from the outside looking in. But that's why we put the quality control measures in to make sure that everything lines up and has a logical rationale behind as to what the issues may or may not be. If you're off by 3 votes, it doesn't mean there's anything untoward. It just means, you know, maybe a scanner caught 2 absentee ballots that went through at one time, and that's why you're over. Or maybe somebody had a stack of 11 or a stack of 9 with a stack of 10. That's going to happen when you have human beings doing this. So again, this is a misunderstanding of how an audit works. We appreciate both the Republicans and Democrats having monitors there to assure the process is flowing properly. That's why we're trying to be transparent. That's why we've had people videotape these and live streaming them. And we've seen the processes move very smoothly around the state. And we're happy with the outcome so far. And we anticipate hitting our mark of midnight tonight to finish the audit. And your follow-up. You're muted. Oh, still muted. Walter, do we?
Yeah, she may not have one. The next is M. Walker.
Hi, Gabe.
Hey.
You were up early, so you must be tired. Just a few quick follow-ups with Walton County. Was that a memory card issue, or was it ballots like Floyd, where they just had them off to the side?
It was a memory card. They discovered, they counted the ballots and realized they hadn't uploaded their memory card. Then when they hand counted them, they saw that they're missing that. Okay,
and 112 counties have, is it 112 that have completely finished everything, the hand counting and the uploading?
No, not necessarily. The 112 are ones that are single digits, and we have some very diligent elections directors who are trying to get down to 0 because they all want to be at 0.
So is it still 78 that have completely finished everything?
Well, the 70 haven't completely finished either. They were the ones that were either at -1 or 0. So we're now up to 58 that are at 0. And another, I didn't break it out. I think it's 20 that is down to 1 because somebody finally found the 1. They're going to continue to work until they're satisfied internally as they get closer to midnight that they have done all they can humanly do to get down to the narrowest margin as possible of being off on ballots if they're going to be off on them at all. So as we get closer to midnight, I anticipate people saying, you know what, It's 8 o'clock. I've done everything I can humanly do to account for these last couple of ballots, and some will get there and some will not. But again, this is about showing the overall system worked, not that it's exact, because human beings are going to come up with slightly different numbers, as we've been saying for 2 weeks when we do type of hand audits.
Just to be precise then, how many counties have finished the hand count and uploaded to the state so that they can just go to bed tonight?
Well, I don't have an exact answer on that because in some cases they're reopening. They'll say they're completed on the Arlo system, but they'll go back and reopen if they find something. So it's hard for me to say right now. We have a lot of green on the board, but I know a lot of those elections directors are still working, even though they put completed in the Arlo system.
And this includes Wes. Can you mute, please? This includes Fulton and Gwinnett. They're still in the
They're still going. The big ones are still going. They're not done yet because there's a lot more tally sheets to go through to do that quality control we were talking about before.
Okay.
And that includes Chatham, Richmond, Muskogee, Bibb, Fulton, Gwinnett, DeKalb, Cobb, all the big ones you can think of.
And in terms of the tens of thousands who still have to finish the hand count, can you tell us which counties those are?
I think the largest ones may be Cobb and Gwinnett, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to follow up and find out.
Cobb and Gwinnett. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have Adam Murphy.
Hey, Wes, can you mute, or can somebody mute Wes for us? Because his background keeps on popping up. Who's the next one?
Let's see. Alan Judd.
Okay, Alan.
Hey, you spoke yesterday about misinformation regarding this process. Is there anything organized that's happening that's, beyond the tweets from the president and the David Schaefers of the world? Is there any kind of organized effort to spread misinformation about this that you're aware of?
I couldn't speak to that necessarily. I mean, when anybody does tweets or Facebook posts now, they can go viral pretty quickly, regardless of who it is. Like I said, both the president and Chairman Schaefer have their jobs to do to defend the votes of the 73 million people who did cast a ballot for the president. And they have every right to question, they have every right to point out issues. They need to remain factual. I think Chairman Schaefer was factual in his thing, that was an error, it was caught and it was fixed, and that does not affect the outcome. The president's tweets basically talking about fraudulent votes, again, it's a little ironic because he has actually gained votes from this process. So we are diligently following our law. And I would hope that people would go to trusted sources like their own county elections directors or the Secretary of State site to get real information about how the system works and what we're doing to protect everybody's vote in the state.
And when you say, or when the president talks about fraudulent votes, you have not discovered fraudulent votes at this point. These votes are legitimate votes that were not counted correctly.
Yeah, in the 4 counties you're talking about, those are legitimate votes that had not previously been counted. But let me state again, we know, as in every election in the history of the United States and the history of mankind, there are people who voted who shouldn't have. There are double voters. There are potential felon voters. There are people who are out-of-state voters. We know they are there, but we have enough evidence to say that they've reached the level of 13,000 or so of them. But again, there is a process and due process in this country. If somebody has evidence, they can go to court and exercise their rights there. Our job in this office is to continue to follow state law and follow the process to complete the audit tonight at midnight and move into the certification process so that we can get the military and overseas ballots out the door on Saturday.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll try Adam Murphy again.
Adam, you got us? You unmuted?
There we go. How are you, Gabriel?
Good.
You'll be able to hear me. Thank you. I'm going to go back to DeKalb County one more time.
Yeah.
I know you've talked about this, but I just need additional clarity there. So what I understand the error was discovered and was corrected. What I don't understand is we had about a 9,000 vote differential there in this error. Has that already been applied to the total vote count, or will that be applied when the audit is complete? Because I'm not sure if those numbers have shifted or corrected themselves, even though you.
Well, no, how it works is you go through on the tally sheets and you say, if it's 10,000 on the tally sheet and you know you had 1,000 ballots, you know that's wrong. So you go through and redo that batch again to get it properly done. So that does not get added to any tallies or anything. Again, we're doing an audit to validate what is in the system now. So there is no error because this is how the process works. You go through, you do quality control to make sure you didn't have a fat finger data entry issue. You didn't have a transposed number. You didn't have an additional zero put on something. That is how an audit works. And when you're dealing with human beings, you have to put the quality control stuff in because it's not like an automatically correcting computer that's going to catch these things very quickly. Human beings are built to make mistakes, and that's why we have to have multiple layers on this of eyeballs looking at each one of these tally sheets, looking at the batches and understanding, you know, I don't think there was 10,000 in that box. I think it was more like 1,000. So it kind of makes sense. So you got to use common sense in these things. And this is why you don't release interim audit reports, because you're going to have wild swings like this that for conspiracy theorists just point to problems. So we're trying not to feed the beast of that. We're trying to say, here are the real data, here are the real results. And that's what the audit is designed to do. Does that cover what you were looking for?
I think so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Doug Richards.
Hey, good morning, Gabe.
Morning, Doug.
As I understand the sort of a standard operating procedure with your Dominion systems is that your audits generally are spot audits. The statewide audit is an anomaly. Given that you have found a number of issues in disparate jurisdictions, is it a given that you're just going to have to do another statewide audit in this upcoming January runoff? And why would you not do that if you think not, aside from the fact that it's a pain in the neck?
Well, we'll understand that the law calls for us to do this audit, and it's not a spot audit from the other one. What we're doing structurally is a risk limiting audit. Now, in this particular case, the presidential race was chosen. It's an election of national significance, and we want to make sure people trust the outcome of that actual election. What would normally happen or potentially happen was you would pick a race. The law calls for any statewide race. In a normal risk limiting audit, there's going to be a margin of, let's say it's 10%, like the traditional, or 5% even. You would still do a statewide audit. You would still build all these ballot manifests. You would still have all this tracking done the same way we did for this audit. That's all done before we decide which race we're going to do. January does not necessarily, I'm not sure if the law triggers an audit for that one or not. We may want to do a risk limiting audit just in case anyway, but that hasn't been discussed yet. The law doesn't necessarily call for it because it's for a general election. This is a runoff election. So what normally happens is you have a 5 or 10% margin. You still have all the ballot manifests. You still use the Arlo tool, and you roll those Dungeons and Dragons dice, those 20 10-sided dice I told you before. You input those numbers into Arlo, and it starts to give you out random ballots you need to choose from all over the state, because it's not a county by county audit. It is a statewide audit. So what you would normally do is if you were doing a risk limiting audit with a wider margin, and I'm not the expert on this, and I'm sure I'm getting blasted on Twitter for trying to simplify this, but I'm trying to make it so people can understand. The computer will say, okay, Fruitland County, you got to take ballot 73 out of batch 7. And then they would put that down to their system. They would put it into Arlo and send over the results of what that ballot was. In Fulton County, you may have to pull like 4 ballots. You got to pull ballot 103 from batch 7, ballot 7,000 from batch 400, et cetera, or from all around the state. Depending on the margin, there could be some counties that don't have to pull any ballots, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to a statistical level of confidence, and we set where that confidence level is. The state election board rule says it has to be 10% or less. In the particular case for this statewide audit, the risk limit is 0. So that's why we're touching and hand auditing every single ballot. So hopefully there will be a wider margin in the January runoff just for election administration purposes. I'm not talking about for outcome purposes, if we decide to do something along those lines. But the law doesn't require it, but I think maybe for confidence, we might look at doing that as well. But again, that's the secretary's decision, not my decision.
Okay, we have Julia Jester.
Hi, thank you again for doing these. I have a question, and then I have kind of like a clarification question. I know that you mentioned before that, you know, there's someone had asked about a coordinated disinformation campaign. I know you guys have been transparent in getting as much as you can out. But Trump literally just tweeted a video from someone with Floyd County, Georgia, with a video kind of alluding that there might be more ballots to be found there, in addition to the ones that were discovered. Where do you have any updates on the investigation into Floyd County that could kind of clear up any you know, speculation that there might be other, like, multiple boxes of ballots left to be found in
There are
Floyd
multiple
County
boxes
or
of ballots,
elsewhere?
because we would have found them through the audit process. This audit process is going through its normal forms right now. One of the things he might be talking about there is that they had to rescan their provisional ballots yesterday after they got through scanning all of the early vote ballots. And he might not have been aware of that beforehand. So if you're not aware of things and it's something different, then it's something new. It could be something bad, but it's not. It's just the process working its way through. The investigations, we can't comment too much on ongoing investigations. And frankly, it's been days and we're still in the middle of the audit. So we're all kind of focused on getting to the point where we can certify this election and give people the confidence that the audit shows that the outcome was correct. And finding these 4 counties that had these issues, either like Floyd, which is this very unique one where they didn't scan ballots, or the other 3 counties where they just realized, oh, we forgot to put these memory cards in the system. None of that is great as far as election administration goes. You want everybody to do everything perfectly, but these are people under high stress times, and the audit found the issue and corrected the issue. It's doing its job. So that's why we do these things, to assure that the outcomes are correct and that every legal vote is counted and the will of the people of Georgia is met.
Have you had any private conversations with the Trump campaign or his allies about trying to stop the spread of possible conspiracy theories and
No,
incomplete
I've not had that. I
information?
mean, best I can do is to tweet back occasionally and occasionally on Facebook say, this isn't right. But again, they have the right to question. We have a First Amendment in this country. They can ask questions. They can go to court. There's all kinds of outlets for this. And I would like for every tweet in the world to ever be factual. That doesn't exist in the real world of Twitter. I think we all know that. So I ask everybody to take what you hear on social media with a grain of salt, one way or the other. I mean, when Stacey Abrams said that there was voter suppression and that she had the race stolen from her, a lot of people on one side of the aisle completely bought it and just disagree with any evidence to the other side. And this, at the same time, when in this particular race where the president says this race is getting stolen, there's a swath of people that no matter how many audits we do, no matter how much evidence we show, they will never believe that this race wasn't stolen from the president. Our job is to follow the law, give as much information out there as we can, be as transparent as we can, and follow our processes so that the majority of people, at least, will understand and accept the outcome as the actual outcome of the election.
And on the certification, the state has said it's largely taking the machine recount, the machine results for its certification process.
It's not largely taking it. We're taking everything to put in the EMS. That will be the
yes, but right. So everything in the machine count is what's going to be certified, except for the counties that had those discrepancies. So Floyd.
No, those are going to be part of the machine counts, obviously, because they've been scanned, they've been put on a memory card, and they will be put into the EMS system.
So sorry, just can you
each county, understand, each county, those 4 counties, their county election boards are coming together to recertify those counts into our election management system. So we're still following our legal process. The counties have to certify it, so their county elections boards will come together. They will vote to put these ballots and these counts that they had missed the first time into their final certified count. Then the state will take those and certify that. And that includes everything on those ballots. It's not just president. So the Purdue race, the Bud McDonald race, all the down ballot races will be there. And just to preempt a question from other people, they are still about 12 or 13,000 votes away from avoiding a runoff. So they're at a similar difference as the president is from being able to overtake former Vice President Biden. So that's where we're at with those. Does that answer your question?
Yes, just making sure that it wasn't, you know, like for counties that only had 1 or 2, like.
Yeah, we're not going to do the 1 or 2 because the 1 or 2 you cannot tie back to this is right. This precinct, is this ballot. because that's just a human thing. But when we find a swath of ballots like this, they were going to be put back in. The county election boards will recertify them, and then we will take those certifications and use that as our final state certification. So those numbers will be in the final counts that the state will certify.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Next is Robin McDonald.
Hi, Gabe. It's Robin McDonald from the Daily Report. I have a question for you and a follow-up. My first question is, after the Secretary of State had his phone call with Lindsey Graham, and I understand you were in the room, he said he consulted with attorneys before deciding not to re-engage. First question is, who were those lawyers? Were they Secretary of State's general counsel, outside counsel, from the Attorney General's office, or SAGs?
Okay, I wasn't in the room. I was on the
All right.
phone. It was
My
emergency.
apologies.
That's okay. I'm just clarifying the report. So I don't know. You'd have to ask the secretary and his attorneys that, because I'm not sure who exactly that would have been. My best guess, it was probably our general counsel, but I don't know that to be a fact. Do you have a follow-up on that one, Robin? Because you're muted again. Okay. Who's next, Walter?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. You
couldn't make it unmute. Second part is, do you know why the decision was made not to re-engage, especially given the U.S. Attorney General's directive to U.S. attorneys to pursue election fraud?
No, you'd have to ask the secretary or his attorneys that he consulted with on that one.
Okay.
Thank you. Who's next, Walter?
Brendan Keefe.
Hey, Brendan. You're still muted. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. Walter and I were pressing the button at the same time. Thanks for keeping us informed, Gabe. This is very much appreciated. Sort of three related questions, if I may. The first is, do you expect to put out any numbers this evening? You've been keeping us updated, as you've been getting new information, but, for those of us planning to burn the midnight oil working tonight, can we expect any update before or around midnight, or would it be tomorrow or Friday?
I'll let you know. My best guess is it'll probably be tomorrow, because we got to tighten it, make sure the reporting is all straight, make sure that our outputs are going to be proper and appropriate, because the last thing we want to do is give out incorrect information when we give out to everybody. So again, I will say this, and I will keep pounding this mantra. Fast is great. We love fast, but accuracy is more important, especially in a situation of such heightened, awareness on everybody's part now around the outcomes of this audit. So my best guess is the final report will probably be tomorrow. We may look at saying, well, here's all the counties that have, everybody's finished. Here's the list of the counties that are finished. With maybe some basic numbers. I'll have more clarity on that at our 4 o'clock press conference. I can give you an exact number. My best guess is it'll probably be tomorrow morning before we have a final output of everything that we're at.
All right, and also a lot of people not following this as closely as we are don't realize that even after certification, the losing candidate is entitled to a recount if the total is within 0.5%, the margin. Can you explain how that works and how that is a machine recount rather than another hand recount under state law?
Sure, Brendan. As Brendan points out, under state law, right now we are in an audit environment that is called for in our law that is pre-certification. Now, once an election is certified, within 48 hours of that certification, the second place candidate, if they are within a half a point, may request a recount. Our state election board rule lays out how that recount will occur. During the procurement process, we got a pretty good deal out of the gate on our equipment. So a decision was made and directed by Secretary Raffensperger, knowing what we were seeing in terms of the state and the political directions it could be going in, that at some point there may be a statewide recount. So for that purpose, for ease of training and for replacement parts and everything else, we decided to get everybody the ICC, which is the high capacity, high speed scanners that would be used mainly for absentee ballots, but also can be used for this recount situation. So what we do is everybody has an ICC, the central scanner, and they would create a test deck themselves that they know the outcomes from the votes. It would be, again, as an example, 50 votes for President Trump, 45 votes for former Vice President Biden, and 5 votes for Joe Jorgensen. So you would then run that through the scanner. You would close that election out. You would get the tape off of it. You would say, yes, it says, 50 votes for the president, 45 votes for the former vice president, and 5 votes for the libertarian candidate. And you would say, okay, this scanner is operating properly and will scan appropriately. So then you clear those off, you zero out the scanner, and then you go through the process of scanning every single ballot again. And they would have to be re-adjudicated again if there was anything where it was unclear as to what the voter intended. But those would be the recount results. And that's how you would get to those things. So they would be done on the scanner, you would load it into the EMS, you would find the outcomes from those. The likelihood of anything changing is even lower there than it is in this hand count. But it is the right of any second place candidate to do that. I would hope that the hand audit would show that, yes, the equipment worked properly, the outcome is correct, and the victor and the second place finisher are in the right order and are the people as the voters of Georgia intended. But again, it is their right. I would hope that this hand audit will be enough to satisfy those to question it. But again, our job is to follow the law. And if it is requested, we will work with the counties to execute that recount.
Last question, Gabe, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Is we tracked down a 96-year-old widow of a World War II hero who was accused by the Trump campaign of voting dead. And the different counties involved there, Newton and Jackson, with another of the 4 alleged dead voters, confirmed they were not dead voters, but legal votes. Do you have any update on the other 2? I know they were under investigation because Fulton County is saying Deborah Jean Christensen wasn't registered to vote and didn't vote. The reason I ask is the president retweeted the Tucker Carlson video that we debunked last night.
I don't have any updates at this time, but what we normally see in situations where it's quote unquote dead people voting, again, removing people from the rolls because they're dead is done at the county level. And we rely on some vital records to do that. It's usually a thing of a father and son living in the same home, different ages, the name matches. In this particular case where you interviewed the woman, let's say young woman, but 96 years young, she was Mrs. her husband's name and always had been, and that's where that came from. It's almost always something like that. We do a pretty good job of removing dead people from the rolls in this state. But again, we're talking about 1s and 2s. And when I said before, there are illegal votes, I'm sure there's people who, and here's something else I'm not really sure of. I mean, if you early vote and then you die by election day, you still had a right to vote. So there's gonna be some of that in some places. We know that. That's just gonna happen. There's gonna be people who, I think there was one I read about, and I don't know if it was in this state or another, where somebody voted for their dead friend because their dying wish, when they voted absentee, was to vote for President Trump. So you're going to see that people do that, not realizing, oh, I could be committing a crime. But again, it's in the 1s and 2s, not 13,000. But I don't have any specific updates on the other 2 right now, Brendan.
Okay, Quinn Scanlon.
Hey, Gabe. I have a few questions, but hopefully it can be kind of a rapid fire.
Okay.
So just really quick, do you guys know how much a recount would cost?
No.
No. Okay. Is the campaign requesting it responsible for paying the cost, or is the state?
No. Under state law, and it has been ever thus, the local jurisdictions take care of that cost. Now, let me clear up a couple of things about this. When we moved the December 1 election and joined it with the January 5th election, the statewide runoff, we ended up saving counties millions of dollars. So our hope is a part of that money can be put towards that. And again, we're looking at finding a cost sharing mechanism through some of our federal Help America Vote Act or HAVA dollars to help offset the cost for the counties.
Okay, but I was actually talking about if like a candidate requested it. So that would still be,
even though a candidate requests it, the state and the county governments will always have to pick up the cost under our state law under this 0.5%.
Okay, awesome. And then you said there were 4 counties that had issues. Are you including DeKalb in that?
No, because with the DeKalb thing is not an issue. Let me go over this again. It is
right. So in DeKalb, what it was is that there was not 10,000 votes reported in their actual original report. It was during the audit, a misentry. They caught it during the audit. None of it has ever been reported.
Correct.
But so then what are it's Floyd, Fayette, and Walton. And then what's the 4th county?
Douglas.
I'm sorry, I missed the top of this. Can you just reiterate quickly what happened in Douglas? I'm
In
sorry.
Douglas County, they did their hand count and they realized they had more ballots than they had votes put into the election management system. They went back and audited and realized we forgot to upload one memory card from one precinct, and that was Lutheran 739. And on the Lutheran 739 card, there were 128 votes for President Trump, 156 votes for former Vice President Biden, and 7 votes for Joe Jorgensen, and 2 undervotes. So that's what happened in Douglas County when they discovered that they had more ballots than they had uploaded into the election night reporting system.
Okay, so then with the 4 counties together, how did that affect the margin? Do you have an overall number?
It took the margin from 14,156 when we started the audit to the lowest number it got down to was 12,753. And now it's up to 12,781 with the 28 additional votes for former Vice President Biden coming out of Douglas County, which was the latest one. So right now, by our tally, the margin is 12,781 in favor of former Vice President Biden.
Great. And then
This is your last one.
This is my last one. Yeah, it is. And so what was the top line number for the number of ballots that have been audited so far?
4,968,000 as of about an hour ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina Cassidy.
Hey, Gabe, thank you
Hey,
so
Christina.
much for doing this. I just wanted to follow up on the state certification. Could you walk me through the process for what happens if a county is unable or unwilling to certify by Friday? Does the Secretary of State have the authority to certify the state's election results without a county having certified independently?
I don't know the answer to that question. My assumption is we are certifying the county certification, so we probably couldn't, but I do not foresee any county not certifying their final outcomes. They're going to follow the law and do their jobs. But we'll follow up with our attorney to make sure we get a more specific answer to you, Christina, because I just don't know off the top of my head. I'm making a supposition based on what I've seen in the past. Follow up, or are you good? Or are you muted?
Emil Moffat.
Okay.
Gabe, what's the role, in your opinion, of monitors in this audit process? Some seem to want them to inspect every ballot or every bit of handwriting on those tally sheets. Is that expecting too much out of that monitor role or position?
I honestly think that's expecting too much out of the monitor position. The whole point of the monitor is to watch the process itself, not to look at individual things on a table, because we don't, unlike the Midwestern states, we don't have challenge provisions where you go to say, I challenge that vote, I challenge that vote. That's not what's happening here. This is the process orderly? Is it organized? Is it looking like the chain of custody has been kept properly? Are they doing the thing where they pass the one ballot over to the other? I mean, and some of these things are not necessary to the audit, but they're there to make sure that it just works. I mean, there was a great article I saw from down in Columbus, Georgia, where Republicans and Democrats alike were working together to make sure the process itself worked. And that's what the intention of the monitors are there for. And we told that 1 for 10 was a minimum, 1 monitor for 10 tables per party. So that's 2 monitors really. That was a minimum. And it was done in part because a few elections directors talked about, we don't have a lot of space as it is, and trying to crowd in all these people is going to interfere with election administration and trying to get this work actually done. So we feel like the election administrators done a good job of allowing in as many monitors as they can who are credentialed. I know on the first day, there was some confusion from the parties and from the counties. This is the first time they're doing some of this stuff this way. And like, I know there was some Republicans that were there with no credentials. So there was no way to say, you're not just a random person off the street. I'm not going to let you walk around on our floor. But eventually they kind of got to that point. Republican lawyers got there. And, some people are more zealous than others. And I know that there were a couple of times where we had to have some investigators kind of talk some people back down. Says, your role isn't to go do what you're doing here. Your role is to make sure the process is going through and write down and document it, because we consider this to be like the voting space where you can't take photographs and do stuff like that. So their role is to make sure it's an orderly process and report back to their parties if they see anything that they think is untoward. That's why they're there. but they're not to be looking at every single ballot. And there's so many guardrails around this between, we have the check-ins, we have the request for absentee ballots, we have the absentee ballots acceptance numbers, we have the poll pad check-ins, we have, early vote check-ins. So we know there's not a way to really manufacture ballots, because that would be way out of the norm and it would be discovered in the audit. So they play an important role, but they're not supposed to be like crowding into people's space and looking at every single ballot with them to argue over that. That's not really their role.
Okay, Lecrae Mitchell.
Hi there. Thanks so much for doing this again, Gabe. I had two questions. The first one is, I know that you've told us about the 112 or so counties that have had a deviation of 1 or so votes. Is there a number that if the deviation is over X number, you can't certify it? Like, is there a number that it has to be within for the counties?
This is a question better directed to our Voting Works consultants on the RLA. I said half jokingly, but half seriously, you got to use some common sense, and you'll know it when you see it. If you're off by 200, you're probably missing an election day voting card, and
right.
you probably need to upload that. If you're off by 1, that's just somebody counting. If you're off by 7 out of 40,000, that's just somebody counting.
Got it.
You just got to put some common sense attached to it. We don't really have a percentage per se that we look at, but you kind of look at it and you kind of know whether you're really far off on those kind of things. If you're 40 off and there's 1,000 votes, that's a problem. You should really be looking into that. But if you're 40 off as 100,000 votes, that could mean you had one person who did stacks of 11 instead of stacks of 10 like 3 times because they were taking a drink. They had to turn around and get a drink of water for a minute. I mean, you've got to apply some common sense to these things. And I know that's a hard thing to say right now, and you want to be exact, but we're dealing with human beings. And I said repeatedly, and I know I sound like a broken record, human beings are the most flawed part of this process. And that's why you have to have these quality control checks to make sure that they get everything right.
Sure.
And there's no way you're going to get 100% accuracy with human beings involved. Never going to happen.
Got it. So in that, though, that decision of like using common sense is left up to the county election officials.
In consultation with our consultants from Voting Works, who this is what they do. They've seen these kind of things before. They've done hand recounts before. I think this is the first, as well as the largest hand audit of pre-certification in the history of the United States. But a lot of the same rules apply and same common sense applications ought to apply.
Gotcha. And then my follow-up was just, if you could just explain for me one more time, in the counties where they have found ballots that were not initially put in on election night, how is it that they knew that those ballots weren't put in on election night versus there just having been an error during the audit process?
In part because of the size, and they knew the batching. So in the audit process, when you look at the batches, you can see there's things you can look at that'll be indicators of, we have an X number of ballots. Our ballot manifest was right. We look at our credit for voting, and that matches the ballots as well. Credit for voting is what you get from the poll pad or eNet from the people checked in for early voting or absentee. So you have these two outward edges. And then when you look at your election night reporting and you're off by 200 or 2,500, you know you've missed something either with the scanning, which was the situation in Floyd, or you're missing a memory card you didn't upload. You can easily go back to your election management system, look at your inventory of what they call tabulators. Is when you make a new memory card, it's called the tabulator card. And you say, oh, I missed that one. I should have caught that in reconciliation. That's how you can more easily find that. It's in Fayette County especially, we already saw that their credit for voting was about 2,500 higher than what they reported. So we kind of expected to see something like that in that system, but we want to let the audit work through it so they can get to that point. Does that cover you, Lecrae? All right, Walter, who's next?
Nick Wooten.
Hey, Gabe, Nick Wooten from McClatchy. I had 2 quick questions for you. There's about, you said tens of thousands of ballots left to be hand audited. You guys have about 12 hours to finish that up.
Yeah.
Are counties going to make that deadline?
Yes.
Okay. Second one, you mentioned that.
Let me say it. Now I'll say it equivocally after my unequivocal yes. You don't know what's going to happen. Our assumption is they're going to be able to get there They look like they're on a good path. We still have to go through the quality control process. Our goal and intent, and no one has said to me, I'm sending up a red flare that we're not going to make it. So far, everybody on the team is feeling pretty good we can make the midnight cut.
Awesome. The second one, you mentioned that counties would cover any recount costs if the Trump campaign decides to request one.
Yeah.
These counties are also funding the audit costs as well. Is that right? Is the state looking for ways to offset those costs as well? And where are y'all at?
Well, there's two things that we've done already, or one thing we've done already, which was by merging the December runoff election with the January runoff election, we've literally saved those counties millions of dollars. So the intent is that part of those costs can go towards this hand audit and potentially a recount. And secondarily, we're looking for a way to do some cost sharing based on our federal Help America Vote Act, or HAVA dollars. So I don't have a mechanism in place for that yet. I'm trying to noodle through it to figure out the best way to have, especially the smaller and medium-sized counties, they're the ones who are most desperate need because they're the tightest budgets. And for the larger counties, looking for a fair way to help, offset part of their costs as well.
So moving the election and the federal funds would help sort of offset both costs.
Yes, that's the intent right now.
And this is sort of an insider Georgia politics question, but that's just the Public Service Commission race that moved from the 1st to the 5th, right?
Well, actually, there's a handful of other races we have runoff for the general.
Okay.
There's about 12 at the local level that moved as well. But in the Public Service Commission race, anything that happened that would have been moved for the statewide runoff from the November 3rd election to December 1st was instantly subject to having to do the rollover list again. A rollover list is the people who are 65 or older or disabled who checked the box on their original absentee ballot request that they wanted to get a ballot throughout the election cycle. So there was no physical way for the state to step in and do that, and there was no physical way for the counties to fulfill that rollover list at this point because it was just too large. It would have taken, I know I talked to one large county, it would have taken them 20 work days to fulfill just those things. And to put, not to find a point on it, we are literally still building ballots right now. So the timeline to get them out the door and get them finished would have been nigh impossible. So it made logical sense. COVID caused the giant jump in the rollover list. COVID is the rationale, is the health emergency we're able to move those with. So it all kind of ties together. It will save them millions of dollars. And frankly, it's easier to administer one election than administer two. And one of our internal fears here was that having to do one in December, then one in January, instead of doing one election well, they would have done two elections not necessarily that great, so especially considering we're still having to do this hand audit and potentially do a recount. So a lot of things went into it, but that was the rationale behind it. And then the HAVA dollars we've been talking about doing, and so that's what I think our next step will be. But right now we're focused on finishing this process up.
Sure. What were some of those races that moved? Just like a handful of them. I know this, was it State Senate District 39?
No, the special elections all stayed. I've got a list, and shoot Walter or Ari an email. We can get that list over to you. I mean,
Awesome. Well,
it's city council races and stuff like that too.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gabe. I appreciate it.
Who's next?
Okay, this one is Stanley's iPhone.
Okay, Stanley, at least I know your last name is an iPhone, so. Stanley, you're unmuted. Go ahead and go. Oh, no, you are muted. Hold on. Let's see. Has to unmute.
All right, let me press unmute and then you press unmute, Stanley.
There you go.
All right, this is Stanley Dunlap with the Georgia Recorder.
Yeah.
You mentioned the difference between the two types of audits, and this is obviously the more intensive full hand count. But with these missing or votes that showed up on some of these memory cards, would they have been caught with the other type of audit, or is this just a function of when you have humans running an election and there are mistakes and that there are going to be missing ballots that maybe don't go unaccounted for in elections?
If we had not done this hand audit, it went only to the recount, since the big way we identified at least 3 of these, actually all 4 of them, was they did have these ballots. They did have the paper voter artifact, and they would have all been scanned. So yes, they would have been discovered under the recount rules as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we've got, which is fine. It's about lunchtime.
All right, it's 12:02. I want to say thanks to everybody again for their respectful questions and trying to get the information out. We are continuing to remain as transparent as we possibly can through our process. We will continue to follow the law. And as I said nearly every day, this is all about process, process, process. And to continue a joke I'd said earlier, for any Mandalorian fans out there, this is the way. So thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you all at 4 o'clock. Bye.